Keontae, those of us who serve in the Senate today have our own families, in many cases. We have careers that we've spent years of our lives on. Senator Brown and I spent some years in the military. He was in the Army. I was in the Navy. Senator Collins, in addition to serve as the United States Senator, she did a great job of telling other senators what to do for a number of years and how to do it well. And she's from Maine, as I said earlier. One of us, Senator Coburn, who's about to speak next, is from Oklahoma, and he is also a physician. Until just a few years ago, he still, even as a member of the House and as a member of the Senate, still delivered babies. He's what's called an OBGYN, obstetrician and gynecologist, and he's done a lot of good work in his life, and he still does. Senator Coburn.
I'm anxious to hear Keontae's testimony. I'll just make one point. Access to a government health care program isn't access to real care, and we're seeing that in this hearing today.
Let me now introduce our leadoff witness, and his name, as you have gathered by now, is Keontae Cook. And Keontae is 12 years old and is a former foster care child. He's recently been adopted by Mr. and Mrs. Scott Cook, and Scott, Carol, we welcome you to today. Mrs. Cook is actually joining Keontae at the witness table, and I believe Mr. Cook is seated right over Keontae's right shoulder. Keontae and his family live in McKinney, Texas, where he's now attending middle school. His many interests include volunteering, competing in cross-country meets, playing the clarinet, and spending time with his family. On behalf of all my colleagues and myself, Keontae, we want to thank you for being with us here today. And we want to thank your mom and your dad for joining us as well. Thank you for bringing them with you. All right. And with that, you are recognized to say whatever's on your mind. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Carper, Ranking Member Brown, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for allowing me to share part of my life with you today and my experiences with medications during foster care. My name is Keontae Cook. I am 12 years old and in the 7th grade. This year I participated in cross-country with my middle school, in which I ranked the top 15 of my class, allowing me to go to regionals. I'm currently first chair for clarinets in my band, and I have 3 small roles in my school play, Cinderella, that will show this month on December 15th. Also, the date for my second year anniversary in my adoptive home. One of my favorite things to do is dance for fun, especially hip-hop and the robot. I was adopted 2 years ago in 2009, and I was in foster care from ages 6 to 10 and a half. Besides the medicines, foster care was all right to me, except for my 3rd foster home. The first 2 foster homes seemed more like they cared about me, but the 3rd home always felt awkward, and I felt pressured by them when I chose my adoptive home. I was pretty ignorant about the medicines I was on at the time. I also didn't know what type of drugs I was on during foster care, or how many drugs I was on since I was put into foster care at age 6. All I knew was that if I didn't take them like I was told to, I couldn't watch TV, play video games, or play with my toys. About a year after I was adopted, I found out I was on 20 different drugs total, and sometimes I took up to 5 drugs at one time. At one point, I was on Vyvanse, 70 milligrams for ADHD, Seroquel, 200 milligrams as a mood stabilizer, Once 2 milligrams for impulse control and ADHD, Buspar for depression, and Clonidine 0.2 milligrams for insomnia. I've also been told that the amounts of some of the drugs I was given were more than most adults take. Some of the things I was diagnosed with were post-traumatic stress disorder, insomnia, ADHD, depression, but I was never told I was diagnosed with anything other than the ADHD. They seem way too much for a regular kid, which I am, and I was very confused when my adoptive parents told me what I was on and why. I've been in the mental hospital 3 times during foster care, and every time I'd get on more meds or new meds to add to the ones I was already taking. Some of the meds were for bipolar and seizures, and I am not bipolar and never had a seizure. Sometimes the meds they gave me made me easy to get irritated, which I feel is not good for a kid to experience. The meds made my appetite go away, too, for a long time. I would barely eat anything. I remember having a bowl of spaghetti, and I ate about 3 bites, and then I was done. I had side effects no one told me about. No one told me I would have or talked with me about before taking a new med. I was so out of it when I had the side effects, sometimes it seemed like it didn't bother me at all. One time I went to visit my youngest sister in her adoptive home. Her mom told me that she didn't want to give me my meds because it made me glazed and tired. My adoptive parents said that when I stayed for my trial weekend with them in October 2009, my meds put me in a lights-out mode 15 minutes after I'd taken them. Some of the meds I took made me have stomach aches. I would get so tired all of a sudden, it felt like I would collapse wherever I was in the house. My foster parents would tell me something, and I wouldn't be able to process it like a normal person would. Sometimes I'd even try turning my head away and then closing my mouth to refuse taking the meds, but I had to take them eventually. I think putting me on all these stupid meds was the most idiotic thing I've ever experienced in foster care and was the worst thing someone could do to foster kids. I was upset about my situation, not bipolar or ADHD. And I think therapy is a better choice over meds if meds are not a necessity in that moment. And I should know because I went to therapy with my adoptive parents for 1.5 years with Dr. Jason Michelini, an attachment therapist, who helped me understand why I acted the ways I did and to figure out how to react in a better way to the things that upset me rather than the way I was doing them. Now I'm not only more focused in school, succeeding above other classmates in reading, band, athletics, not going to the office anymore for bad behaviors, and I'm happy. Chairman Carper, Ranking Member Brown, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to Washington, D.C. to tell my story.
Gandhi. Well, we have a lot of witnesses that come before this committee. I don't ever remember having one as young as you, and it's rare that we have one as eloquent as you have been this morning. Thank you for just an amazing statement.
Thank you too, Mr. Chairman.
Now, you mentioned to us that you have, well, first of all, how long have you been in Washington, D.C., you and your mom and dad?
A day and a half.
Yeah. Have you done anything that was fun?
At the Lincoln Memorial, there's like something that looked like a slide, and I slid down it and ran into the sign that says "Do not touch."
It turns out I got up early this morning. I usually go home to Delaware at night, but I got up early this morning. Senator Brown and I like to run and work out, and I ran down to the Lincoln Memorial today. It's my favorite run. It's 5 miles down there and back, and so you were right there. I saw a sign that looked like somebody knocked it over. I was wondering who might have done that, Scott. So, no. Well, we're glad you're here. And I hope you've had a little bit of fun as well, and thank you for preparing and for joining us here today. You mentioned in your testimony, that you had lived in 3 foster homes before finding the Cooks, or before they found you, and you became their adopted son, and they became your adopted parents. And I think I understood you to say that your experience in the first 2 foster homes was generally pretty good, and not so good in the third one. Do you recall whether it was in the first home, the second home, the third home, when you first began taking these drugs? Do you have any recollection of that?
It was the first home.
Mm-hmm. And were you taking a lot of them or some of them?
I was taking about 5. No, not 5. Maybe like 3 a day.
Mm-hmm. And do you recall why doctors or someone thought you should be taking those drugs? What was it about your behavior that people thought, well, he should be taking some kind of mind-altering drug? What was it?
I would throw tantrums because I was upset, and I couldn't let it out in a way that I needed to. Mm-hmm. So then they thought, well, let's just put him on meds, so he'll basically be quiet.
Okay. And it sounds like you kind of like zoned out. Is that what you said? You sort of zoned out. It's hard to do well in school when you're zoned out. It's hard to do well in the Senate when you're zoned out.
It's like,
But somewhere along the line, somebody figured out, maybe it's when you came to live with your mom and dad, that that wasn't working, and there was a better way to help you deal with whatever behavior problems you were having. Who helped figure that out? Who helped figure that? Your mom. She's the woman. Okay. And what turned out to be more helpful than taking those medicines?
Therapy with an attachment therapist.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk just a little bit about that for us, please?
I would go every Saturday, and we'd talk about how I was doing in school, and we'd talk about deep conversations about my mom, and that would help me get over my anger about my mom. And then
Okay. But it worked.
it did.
Yeah, it worked. I have a fellow that Senator Coburn and I serve on a finance committee together, and we had a witness. A bunch of witnesses came to see us a couple of months ago, and they were talking to us about how to reduce this big budget deficit we have. You know, we're spending more as a government than we actually take in taxes. And one witness was talking to us about how do we get better health care results. And he said, here's what we should do. He said, we should find out what works and do more of that. That's all I said. Find out what works and do more of that. And in this case, we need to find out what works and do more of that. We've got 50 states across this country. In some of those states, they're figuring out what works. We need to find out what works, and throughout the country, do more of that. I said when we had a chance to meet earlier today and talk, I said to Chianti, you've been, for a guy 12 years old, you had a pretty rough ride. It sounds like you ended up in a really good place today for yourself and for your mom and dad. But you had a rough ride, and a lot of foster kids do. A lot of kids do in life. It's part of life, I think. But I think because of your presence here today, a whole bunch of kids, thousands of kids across this country, kids that are foster kids and kids that are not, are going to have a chance for a better life, a more productive life, be better students, and to go on and be a real success. I just want to ask I don't know if there might be one thing that you'd like to pass along or share to us with, like advice. This is like the child advises the elders, but just it's maybe one piece of advice you have for all of us here today. One thing that you think maybe we could take away from your testimony to help more children across the country. What would that one thing be?
That meds aren't going to help a child with their problems. It's just going to sedate them, make them tired, make them forget it for a while, and then it comes back and it happens again. What I learned in therapy is that when you're taking therapy, you talk about the deepest thing, it hurts, then it comes back, but you can handle it better.
Well, that's a mouthful. Thank you for those words of wisdom. And with that, let me turn to Senator Brown. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I've seen you run, okay? And I know how fast he does a mile, and I think he can beat us both. So, all right. And
he could run us into the ground.
And that loop is only 3.5 miles. It's not 5.
It is 5.
5.
Trust me.
Okay, I feel better then. Well, thank you. Everyone's